Iran is erupting right now with mass demonstrations against an authoritarian regime, brutal crackdowns, and innocent people dying in the street. And the United States is doing what it always does, using this violence to justify more territorial control in the region. We know that the United States bombs do not liberate people. They entrench dictators even further, they justify authoritarian crackdowns, and they stifle any movement based politics that happen when people try to emancipate themselves. Let's zoom out and look at an overview of what's specifically happening in the region. We know that Iranian civilians started these mass demonstrations in December, mostly over economic anxiety. There has been hyperinflation that has driven people to the brink, unemployment, and long term repression that has not allowed Iranian civilians to increase their quality of life. And this has turned into more of a rejection of the regime's legitimacy instead of just focusing on economics, as most protests morph into. There's open defiance of the theocratic regime that has continued to repress people's civil liberties. And protesters right now are risking arrests, they're risking torture, and they're risking death in the streets. We've seen different metrics that have been provided by different information agencies, but thousands of people are continuing to be slaughtered every single day in the streets. The state's response has been live ammunition, mass detentions from people, internet blackouts in order to stifle any information from leaving the region, and hospitals reporting protest related injuries. This is a homegrown uprising. This is not injected by the United States. This is not another foreign regime that is instigating these people. These are Iranian civilians that we know are organically sparking these protests. We see many US officials claiming to support these protesters. And at the same time, military operations are being floated, sanctions and tariffs are escalating, which only stifles the economic opportunities of the Iranian civilians. And many, many war hawks are openly discussing bombing campaigns and airstrikes. But congressional members can talk all they want about airstrikes. We can't do anything without the explicit support of the commander in chief, the head of the military, the president himself. Let's see what the president has to say about how we can help make sure that the Iranian people are protected.
That it will retaliate in the instance of U.S. strikes against U.S. assets in the Middle East. What do you say to U.S. service members about why it is worth the risk to intervene in Iran?
Yeah, Iran said that the last time I blew them up with the nuclear capability, which they don't have any longer. So Iran said that the last time. They better behave.
This is like how a 12-year-old imagines what foreign policy looks like. This is not deterrence. I bombed you once and I'll do it again. I'll blow you up. You better behave. This is not how you conduct yourself on the international stage as the commander in chief. Is this not raising eyebrows to any Republican that says they support Donald Trump? Do you genuinely think this is how we bring about a better world? Or is this just the ego of a narcissistic man who thinks that he can do whatever he wants with zero consequences? We are not just going to war with Iran if we intervene. We are escalating potential tensions with Russia, with China, any non Western power that has postured itself as adversarial to the United States. This assumes that any sort of violence produces obedience, and Donald Trump ignores completely retaliation dynamics. We are threatening an entire country with discipline. If Donald Trump actually cares about the civilian population, he would not go to the first resort being military strikes. He continues to threaten this, threaten this, threaten this. All that does is embolden the regime. The logic that force equals control is exactly what has dragged the United States into numerous foreign disasters. This article from Reuters says that Iran's stockpile of missiles has increased since a 12-day war with Israel last year. Revolutionary Guard's aerospace commander Majid Musavi said on Wednesday, according to state media, following U.S. President Donald Trump's threats of intervention amid anti-government protests in Iran. We are at the peak of our readiness, Musavi was quoted as saying by state media, adding that wartime damages have been repaired and output in various areas by the Guard's aerospace forces was higher than before June 2025. This is why the United States intervening in a country does the exact opposite of what it claims to do. Don't listen to any US official that tells you that we're going in altruistically to save the Iranian civilian population. We are going in for regime change. And we know that our invasion only reframes what the crisis looks like. It is no longer prioritizing national coverage on regime brutality. It is about national survival. The Iranian government gets justification for continued mass suppression They get a propaganda cover and a new villain to point to when they are doing these brutal attacks on civil rights. And they have the ability to label any protester as collaborators with the oppressor. If you go against the Iranian regime, you are just helping the enemy, the United States, that's coming in to have their foreign influence. This is not helping people. Nothing rescues an unpopular authoritarian government more than a foreign bomb. We also know that there's no such thing as a limited strike. Iran is a regional power in the Middle East. It does not have to attack the US on home soil. Retaliation will typically be indirect. It will be towards allies or proxy wars, and it will be US military bases where US troops will then suffer the consequences of the actions of the president. This is what's so frustrating about being a progressive. Like, every person who's anti-war sees the writing on the wall. You know what this looks like historically, and it always leads to instability in the region. But all of the neoconservatives and the national narrative starts to become, if you were against our bomb campaign, if you are not willing to topple a foreign government, then you are pro-authoritarian regime. You love everything that's happening. No, that's not what it is. You can recognize that Saddam Hussein was a brutal leader and our invasion of Iraq was not justified. That was sold as liberation. George W. Bush said, we are going to be liberating the Iraqi people. What happened there? I thought we were all on the same page. Over 80% of Americans, when polled, recognize that the Iraq war was a mistake. That is a war crime that we should not have engaged in. Afghanistan, that was sold as a necessity. We have to control the region in order to bring about democracy to the Middle East. Not successful. Gaddafi in Libya, sold as humanitarian. We need to get rid of this leader in order to help the Libyan people. All of these have the exact same outcome: instability. The United States is not able to maintain control. We stay there for decades and then we leave and we say, whoops, we'll get it next time. No, that is not how this works. We are not going to save the Iranian people by instituting a puppet regime that is going to do the United States bidding. That is just going to lead to more repression. So what's the point? Why are we doing it? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First and foremost is the reason most people know. It is about resource and economic leverage. The Middle East has long been central to important economic trade routes. It has been oil pricing, global energy supply. All of this is really central to which region is able to have dominance over these important sectors of the economy. And the United States foreign policy for decades has been designed to have friendly control over the countries that oversee the region. Basically, just US puppet regimes who are going to be doing the bidding of the United States because they know they have to. We also prevent rivals from dominating the region. We don't want China, Russia, or any other adversarial country to have that economic control, which is why our mentality is get there first. So it's not about ideology controlling the Middle East. It's really about controlling the global economy. But it's also about territorial control. We want to make sure that we have as much power projection as possible. The United States maintains military bases across the entire world, but more specifically and heavily concentrated in the Middle East. It gives us strategic alliances. Iran represents a challenge to US dominance. They also have partnered and cooperated with other adversarial nations because they are an independent regional power that's outside US control. We don't like that. We don't want anybody to be outside of our control. We are the global empire. Like many of our decisions made in the Middle East, they come at the demands of Israel. Israel has long viewed Iran as their primary adversary in the Middle East, and they have long pressured the United States to stifle any influence from growing in the region. Iran has funded a lot of insurgency groups, both in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. And we know what the Israeli playbook is. They want territorial expansion above all else. That is why they continue the settlements in the West Bank. That is why they're continuing to acquire more territory. And they would want nothing more than to control Iran, one less adversary in the Middle East, to get full Israeli control of the entire region. The false choice that continues to be told to the American people, the narrative that is brewing amongst Washington officials, is we either bomb Iran or we are doing nothing. That is false. That is dangerous. That is an open lie. We do not have that dichotomy. There are a lot that we can do in order to help the Iranian people succeed in their rebellion against their own government. And that does not include only bombing key parts of infrastructure or continued economic sanctions to starve the population. We can do international investigations. We can do humanitarian relief. We can have support for asylum seekers. Do you think anybody in the Trump administration wants Iranian refugees who are fleeing a repressive government to come to the United States? Of course not. They would brutalize them with ICE the second that they step into our country. We need more communication access for protesters, build infrastructure that will allow people to get the word out of what's actually happening in the region. It does not have to be bombs or nothing. That is not the choice. That is not the sacrifice that we have to make. Because we know that military intervention does the exact opposite of what it's claiming to do. It is not about altruism. Militarism is not the opposite of inaction. It is often the laziest option that only helps defense contractors, people who want to get more resource acquisition, and the military might of Washington to push a neoconservative ideology that the United States has to control every part of the globe. The Iranian regime is brutal, illegitimate, and deserves to fall. That's all true. But the United States intervening will not make that happen. History shows that when we try to control more territory in the Middle East, it leads to further instability, creates this power vacuum for more extremism, and stifles out the voices of people advocating for their liberation in their own blood. If Washington actually cares about the Iranian people, we can't turn their uprising into an economic opportunity. Because the fastest way to kill a liberation movement is to bomb people and call it strength.